first. And then at 4:30 Eastern, lawmakers will turn to the confirmation of a new Solicitor General. A test vote on that nomination is set for 5:30 Eastern. And now to live coverage of the U.S. Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Lord of life, you have given us the great hope that your kingdom shall come on earth. Infuse our lawmakers with such power that your kingdom indeed will come, even as your will is done on earth. May the fact that you rule in our hearts so transform our lives that we will be your instruments for good in our nation and world. Lord, we dedicate this day to you to be used in serving your kingdom. Thank you for putting at our disposal all that we need to succeed. Assure us of your presence above us, beneath us, around us, and within us, providing us with clear direction to advance your kingdom on earth. We pray in your great name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., June 6, 2011. To the Senate. Under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Christopher A. Coons, a senator from the state of Delaware, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President Pro Tempore.
Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
The Senate will be in period of morning business till 4:30 today. Following morning business, the Senate will be in executive session to consider the nomination of Donald Verrilli to be Solicitor General of the United States. Unless an agreement is reached, approximately 5:30, the Senate will vote on the motion and vote cloture on the Verrilli nomination. Yes, 1125 is at the desk, and it's due for a second reading.
Clerk will read the title of the bill for the second time.
S. 1125, a bill to improve national security letters, the authorities under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978 and for other purposes.
Mr. President, I would object to any further proceedings with respect to this bill.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President, I welcome back my colleagues for what I hope.
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The bill will be placed on the calendar subject to the provisions of Rule 14.
Sorry about that, Mr. President. I welcome back my colleagues for what I hope will be a productive month. This month is not unlike last month, though, or the month before, or the month before that. Once again, our constituents are concerned with one thing above all. That's jobs, work. They're concerned because of what the economy means for their families and their lives. They're worried about paying the bills next month and sending their kids to school next year. Too many want to go to the bank once again and know the dignity of depositing a paycheck instead of an unemployment check. Our constituents are also concerned because of what our economic future will mean for our nation. They're afraid that the ill-informed politicians might lead the country into a default crisis, and they all fear the terrible consequences that would have, consequences that would hurt us as a country and hurt our families and really the world. I heard these concerns last week in Nevada. We all heard them in our states when we went home last week, and we hear them loudly and clearly. So we're going to focus our attention this week and month on jobs just as we have all year. I'm disappointed that our Republican colleagues seem determined to distract that focus. They want to spend the Senate's time debating an extreme social agenda that would hurt families, seniors, and our economy. They want to add Medicare in order to pay for more of millionaires' tax breaks and oil company subsidies. That's not good policy, and it's even good politics. The American people strongly oppose that policy, and so do Democrats in Congress. But every day, Republicans prove that they're not just tone deaf to Americans' opinions, they're also tone deaf to cold, hard economic facts. Last week, we got a discouraging jobs report. The economy added jobs, but not as many as we had hoped. And Moody's sent a letter that gave a clear warning that a default crisis would send our economy into a tailspin. There's no time to waste. The longer Republicans insist on dismantling Medicare as a price for moving forward, the longer the unemployed will wait for good news, and the closer the nation will come to a default crisis. Republicans' ideology of obstruction isn't limited to economics or seniors' health. We also see it in their approach to reforming the Senate's constitutional duty of confirming the President's nominees for important positions. A few weeks ago, Republicans blocked a well-qualified, fair-minded, and widely respected legal scholar for a seat on the United States Court of Appeals. Now they're continuing these partisan antics by threatening to block two more non-controversial nominees. The first is Peter Diamond. He's one of the nation's top economists. He's won the Nobel Prize in economics. Not long ago, he had bipartisan support for his nomination to the Fed's Board of Governors. All of a sudden, for no known reason, certainly no good reason, Republicans have decided to stand in the way of this nomination. The second, Don Verrilli, is the President's nominee to be Solicitor General of the United States. The Judiciary Committee approved him by a 17-to-1 margin. So in addition to being in addition to being supremely qualified, he's clearly not controversial. But now Republicans are threatening to block this nominee over requests for documents totally unrelated to him or his position. I hope they don't hold him up for those reasons that have nothing to do with his nomination. Blocking every nominee, no matter the merits, is no way to govern or to lead. It's no way to move forward. Mr. President, if we're going to keep our economy upright for families and for our nation as a whole, we have to recognize real problems and propose realistic solutions. We can't hold one policy hostage to another or be bound by some strange ideology. Every month we play these games. Every month we do that, it guarantees that the following month will be more of the same avoidable fights. For families worried about affording the basics and for our nation's fundamental economic strength, we need to get serious before it's too late. Would the Chair announce morning business?
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved, and under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business until 4:30 p.m., with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Mr. President,
The Senator from Iowa.
I would ask unanimous consent that I could speak for 30 minutes.
Without objection.
When it comes to doing oversight, I think I have a reputation of doing just as vigorous oversight when we have Republican presidents as much as when we have Democrat presidents. And what I'm speaking to the Senate about today has no partisanship in it, because I could have said the same thing and did say about the same thing when there was a President Bush or a President Clinton or a President Reagan. I speak today about watchdogging the watchdogs, as I have done many times in the past. I first started watchdogging the Pentagon back in the early 1980s when President Reagan was ramping up defense spending. Then, a group of defense reformers were examining the pricing of spare parts at the Defense Department, and we uncovered some real horror stories like $750 toilet seats and $695 ashtrays all going into military aircraft. Ridiculous, of course. As news reports of these horror stories were hitting the street, offices of inspectors general, we call them OIGs, Office of Inspector General, these were sprouting up in every federal agency as a result of a recently passed act of Congress in 1978. The Defense Department OIG officially opened for business March the 20th, 1983. Today, thanks to the Inspector General Act of 1978 and the taxpayers, we now have a real army of watchdogs. The question is, to what extent are they doing their business? This mushrooming IG bureaucracy is very expensive. It costs over $2 billion a year, but it now occupies a pivotal oversight position within our government, a very important role to play. As a senator dedicated to watchdogging the taxpayers' precious money, I looked to the IGs for help. That's because I just don't have the resources in my own office to investigate every allegation that might come my way. Like other members of Congress, I regularly tap into this vast reservoir of talent that's called the Inspector General. We count on them. We put our faith and trust in their independence and honesty. We rely on them to root out and deter fraud and waste in government wherever that waste and fraud rears its ugly head. If, and that's a big if the IGs are on the ball, then the taxpayers aren't supposed to worry about things like $750 toilet seats. But I underscore the word if because fraud and waste are still alive and well in government. Now, you could legitimately ask, how can this be? We created a huge army of watchdogs, yet fraud and waste still exist unchecked. So I keep asking myself that same question that you might ask. Who is watchdogging the watchdogs? True, there is an IG watchdog agency called the Council of Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency. But that's just another toothless wonder. So the senator from Iowa has a duty today. I'm here to present another oversight report on the Pentagon watchdog. I call it, quote, a report card on fiscal year 2010 audits issued by the Department of Defense Inspector General. It assesses progress towards improving audit quality in response to recommendations that I made on an oversight report that I gave to my fellow senators last year. After receiving a series of anonymous letters from whistleblowers alleging gross mismanagement at the Office of Inspector General and the audit office within that office, my staff initiated an in-depth oversight review. My staff focused in this audit on reporting by that office, and our work began 2 years ago. On September the 7th, 2010, I issued my first oversight review. It evaluated the 113 audit reports issued for fiscal year 2009. It determined that the Office of the Inspector General audit capability, which costs the taxpayers about $100 million a year, these capabilities were gravely impaired. As a watchdog, degraded audit capabilities give me serious heartburn for one simple reason. It puts the taxpayers' money in harm's way. It leaves the huge sums of money vulnerable to theft and waste. Audits are the Inspector General's primary tool for rooting out fraud and waste. Audits are the tip of an Inspector General's spear. A good spear always needs a finely honed cutting edge. Right now, the point of that spear is dull. The Inspector General's audit weapon is effectively disabled. In speaking about my first report here on the floor last September 15th, I urged Inspector General Hedel to, quote, hit the audit reset button, end of quote, and get audits to refocus on the core Inspector General mission of detecting and reporting fraud and waste. My report offered 12 specific recommendations for getting the audit process back on track and lined up with the Inspector General's Act of 1978. The Office of Inspector General's report, or response to my report, has been very positive and very constructive. In a letter to me dated December 17th last year, Inspector General Hedel promised to, quote, transform the audit organization, end of quote, consistent with recommendations in my report. The newly appointed Deputy IG for Auditing, Mr. Dan Blair, produced a roadmap pointing the way forward. Blair's report, dated December 15th, laid out a plan for improving, quote, timeliness, focus, and relevance of audit reports, end of quote. He promised to create, quote, a world-class oversight organization providing benefit to the Department, the Congress, and the taxpayer, end of quote. As part of the response to my report, the Audit Office also tasked two independent consulting firms, Quest Government Services and Knowledge Consulting Group, to conduct an organizational assessment of the Audit Office and its reports. These independent professionals seem to reach the very same conclusions that I have. The Quest report issued October 2010 put it this way, quote, we do not believe audit is selecting the best audits to detect fraud, waste, and abuse, end of quote. The auditors, the Quest report states, have lost sight of that goal and, quote, need to step back and refocus on the IG's core mission, end of quote. So, Mr. President, that is exactly what I saw last year and what I continue to see today. However, I want to be not totally pessimistic. All of the signals coming since my report from the IG's office are encouraging. They tell me that I am on the right track. The best question before us is this: when will the promised reforms begin to pop up on the radar screen? The fiscal year 2010 reports examined in my report card are issued between October 2009 and September 2010. They were set in concrete, so to speak, long before Mr. Blair's transformation was approved. So the full impact of those reforms will not begin to surface in published reports until later this year or in the fiscal year 2011-12 reports. However, that is not to say that some improvement is not possible anytime now, since discussions regarding the need for audit reform actually began in June 2009. As you will soon see, Mr. President, there is no sign of sustained improvement, not yet today, but a faint glimmer of light can be seen in the distant horizon. In order to establish a solid baseline for assessing the IG's transformation efforts, my staff has taken another snapshot of recent audits. My latest overview report is best characterized as a report card because that is exactly what it is. Each of the 113 unclassified audits issued in fiscal year 2010 was reviewed, evaluated, and graded in 5 categories as follows. Category number 1 was relevance. Category number 2, connecting the dots on the money trail. Number 3, strength and accuracy of recommendations. 4, fraud and waste meter. And 5, timeliness. Grades of A to F were awarded in each category. To average, it was necessary, obviously, to use numerical grades of 1 to 5 and then convert them to standard A to F grades. Scoring was based on answers to key questions like this. Was the audit aligned with the core Inspector General mission? Did the audit connect all the dots in the cycle of transactions from contract to payment? Did the audit verify the scope of alleged fraud and waste using primary source accounting records? Were the recommendations tough and appropriate? And lastly, how quickly was the audit completed? Then each report was given a score called the Junkyard Dog Index. That is the overall average of a grades awarded in the 5 evaluation categories. For grading timeliness, the following procedure was used. Audits completed in 6 months or less received a grade of A. Those completed in 6 to 9 months, a B. Those completed 9 to 12 months, a C. And those taking 12 to 15 months, a D. And those that took over 15 months, an F. After each report was graded individually, all the scores for each report in each rating category were added up and averaged to create a composite score of all 113 audit reports. The overall composite score awarded to the 113 reports was D-. This is very low indeed. Admittedly, the grading system used is subjective. However, as subjective as it may be, my overall staff has determined that it's reasonable and a rough measure of audit quality. And right now, overall audit quality is poor. The low mark is driven by pervasive deficiencies and surfaced in every report examined, with 15 notable exceptions out of the 113. Those deficiencies are the same ones pinpointed by the Quest report previously referred to. Instead of being hardcore, fraud-busting contract and financial audits, most reports were policy and compliance reviews having no redeeming value whatsoever. And that's basically the recommendations that I gave to the Inspector General last September when I criticized then what they were doing, spending too much time on policy audits and not enough time on chasing the money, on the waste of taxpayers' money, because you got to follow the money if you're going to find out where there's waste, fraud, and abuse, particularly the fraud. So what's been done for most of these have no redeeming value whatsoever because they did not pursue fraud-busting contract and financial audits instead of policy and compliance reviews. Quite simply, the auditors then were not on the money trail 24/7 where they need to be to root out fraud and waste as mandated by the IG Act. There is one bright spot, however. The auditors got it right, mostly right, in 5 reports and partially right in 10 other reports. Clearly, this was a drop in the bucket. But these 15 reports, which constituted just 13% of the total that we reviewed for fiscal year 2010 output, proved that the Audit Office is capable of producing quality reports. The 15 best reports earned grades of good to very good, overall with excellent grades in several categories. They involve some very credible and commendable audit work. Each one deserves a gold star. While the top 5 reports earned overall scores of C+ to B-, those scores would have been much higher were it not for long completion times. The average time to complete the top 5 reports was 21 months. Long completion times make for stale information and, of course, makes the reports irrelevant. Had they been completed in 6 months, for example, they could have earned a high B+ scores. Such long completion times clearly show that doing nitty-gritty, down in the trenches audit work requires large audit teams. If, and I want to emphasize if, they're to be completed in a reasonable length of time. Right now, there are no specified goals for audit completion times. They are desperately needed, and then audit teams can be organized with the right skills set to meet those goals. My report includes 7 individual report cards, 6 on the best reports, and 1 on the worst report. I think the best way for my colleagues to understand my audit report card is to briefly walk through 2 of them, the best and the worst. The highest grade was awarded to an audit that the Department of Defense entitled Foreign Allowances and Differentials Paid to DoD Civilian Employees Supporting Overseas Contingency Operations, end of title. This report examined the accuracy of $213 million in payments to 11,700 DoD civilians in fiscal year 2007-2008 for overseas, quote-unquote, danger and hardship allowances. After reviewing the relevant payment records, the auditors determined that the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, and I'm going to refer to that as their acronym DFAS, had made improper payments, underpayments, and overpayments totaling $57.7 million. The audit recommended that DFAS director, quote, take appropriate corrective action to reimburse or recover the improper payments, end of quote, and that new policies and procedures be put in place to preclude erroneous payments in the future. This report received an overall grade of B-, however, it received excellent grades, A- in 3 categories: relevance, connecting the dots on the money trail, and fraud and waste meter. But it earned a B- for incomplete recommendations and an F for timeliness, because it took too long, over 21 months, to complete, and so it's stale at that point. The auditors went to the primary source records to verify the exact amount of erroneous payments. And I want to emphasize to the auditors at the IG that this move is the one reason why this report earned high scores. Very few audits, just a handful, actually verified dollar amounts using primary source accounting records. And that's why I emphasize so often to follow the money trail if you're going to find the fraud and the waste. Now, in this report, the recommendations were good but did not go far enough. Recommending recovery or reimbursement of over or underpayments was worth a B-, but responsible officials were not identified and held accountable for the sloppy accounting work that produced $57.7 million in erroneous payments. And it's kind of a rule of thumb around this place. If you don't identify who screwed up and make them feel personally responsible and send a message to other people, how are you going to get changes to be made? Did the audit office follow up to determine whether the DFAS director had made steps to reimburse underpayment and recover overpayments? The answer is probably no. In fact, nothing has been done. On February 23, 2011, in response to a question from my office, DFAS reported that the Department of Defense is still, quote, unquote, developing a policy to fix a problem. Now, isn't it funny that they got to develop a policy for what's so obviously wrong? And once that process is completed, though, DFAS will, quote, take appropriate corrective action to reimburse and initiate collection action, end of quote. When auditors make good recommendations, like here in this audit, and nothing happens, it's like they are kind of howling in the wilderness. And, of course, that's got to be very demoralizing. At this late hour, probably correcting these mistakes, the chances of correcting are fading fast. For starters, this audit work began over 2 years ago. Couple that with the fact that it looked at payments that were made in the year 2006. That's 5 years ago. With the passage of so much time, this has become essentially an academic exercise. That is exactly why reports need to focus on current problems and why they must be completed promptly. And that is exactly why this one, which took 16 months to complete, earned an F for timeliness, but otherwise was a pretty good audit. The rest of the audits examined in my report card, 98 of all, or 87% of the total output for fiscal year 2010, were poor quality and earned grades of D and F. These are prime examples of the kind of audits targeted in the Quest report that I previously referred to. That's an outside report brought in by, have the Department of Defense bring them in to do some investigating that isn't questionable because they don't have an interest in what comes out. But these audits were not designed to detect fraud and waste. Well, that's what the IG's department ought to be doing. Follow the money trail. Now, it happens that they did not document and verify financial transactions. They were not on the money trail where they needed to be and where their audit manuals tell auditors to go to detect fraud and waste. They did not audit what truly needs to be audited. They had little or no monetary value or impact. Some were mandated by Congress, including 27 memo-style audits of stimulus projects. That's from the Stimulus Act that we passed here, 2009. Tiger teams should have been formed to tackle these audits. Unfortunately, the exact opposite happened. These were the worst of the worst. They contained no findings of any consequence. They offered few, if any, recommendations. Most did not even identify the cost of the project audited. The taxpayers were deeply concerned about the value of these so-called shovel-ready jobs that were supposed to be quickly consumed by the stimulus bill of 2009. The taxpayers were looking for aggressive oversight. The taxpayers wanted assurances that huge sums of money were not wasted. The taxpayers got none of the objectives they sought. Instead of probing audits, the taxpayers got the equivalent of an Inspector General stamp of approval, like a rubber stamp that reads, "Okay, approved." Mr. President, I will not review the worst reports. It typifies, I will now review the worst report. It typifies the ineffectiveness and wastefulness of the bulk of the fiscal year 2010 audit production. I remind my colleagues, each one of these reports cost an estimated $800,000. The report that received the lowest score is entitled by the auditor, quote, Defense Contract Management Agency Acquisition Workforce for Southwest Asia. It received an F score in every category across the board. The purpose of this report was to determine whether the Defense Contract Management Agency had adequate manpower to oversee contracts in Southwest Asia. It concluded that the Defense Contract Management Agency was unable to determine those requirements, and there was no plan in doing so. The report recommended that the Defense Contract Management Agency, quote, define acquisition workforce requirements for Southwest Asia, end of quote. This is one of the many OIG policy reviews, but this one is unique in that it took 18 months to review a policy that did not even exist. This audit should have been terminated early on, but as the Quest report points out, the Inspector General's office has no process, quote, for stopping audits that are no longer relevant, end of quote. So this is kind of like a runaway train. And what redeeming value did this report offer to the taxpayers? None that I can see. This is the stuff for the Department of Defense staff study or some think tank analysis, not for an independent Office of Inspector General audit. This audit, like so many others like it, did not focus on fraud and waste, and not surprisingly, found no fraud or waste. The Defense Contract Management Agency has a long history of exercising lax contract oversight. The Office of Inspector General resources would have been better spent auditing one of the Defense Contract Management Agency's $1 3/10 trillion in contracts. Go where the money is if you want to find the fraud. Follow the money. The inclusion of individual report cards on the best and worst audits is meant to be constructive educational exercise. So I am hoping the analyses accompanying these report cards will serve as a guide and a learning tool for auditors and managers alike. I am hoping the auditors will read my report and use it to sharpen their skills. I hope it will help guide them on a path to reform and transformation. If the auditors adopt and follow the simple guidelines used to gauge the quality of the best and worst reports, they will begin producing top-quality audits that are fully aligned with the core IG missions prescribed by that 1978 law. Before wrapping up my comments, I'd like to call attention of my colleagues to several very interesting charts presented in the final section of my report card. They appear in the chapter entitled Comparative Performance with Other OIG Audit Offices, meaning in other departments of our executive branch. These two sets of charts highlight striking contrasts. They show that the Department of Defense auditors are being significantly outperformed by their peers at three other agencies, the Department of Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, and Homeland Security, and by very substantial margins indeed. Their peers may be 5 times more productive than they are at the Department of Defense and able to produce audits at 1/4 of their costs. I would offer one caveat of what I've said, though, about the other departments' IG. While I have reviewed comparative cost and productivity data from all 4 audit offices, I have not evaluated the quality of reports issued by the other 3 OIGs, meaning Health and Human Services, Department of Homeland Security, and Housing and Urban Development, as I did report on quality of the Department of Defense report card. I happen to think that it's a fair apples-to-apples comparison. Now, it may not be, and I want to say that I don't know for sure. Deputy IG of Auditing, Mr. Blair, needs to provide a satisfactory explanation for these apparent disparities. Otherwise, he may need to hit the reset button once again on audit production and costs, as well as what he has said he's doing now. While Inspector General Hodel cannot be happy with an overall audit grade of D-, I think he understands the problem. And I believe that his heart is in the right place and he's taken the right steps to fix it. His apparent commitment to audit reform and Mr. Blair's promise to, quote, unquote, create a world-class auditing oversight organization, those words happen to be music to my ears. They bode well for the future. In other words, bode well for the future that these people do their job and do it right. Fraud and waste will be rooted out, as people would fear to commit that in the first place, considering the fact that people are going to be on their tail and find out about it. For right now, though, I cannot report that I see sustained improvement in audit quality. Not yet, not by a long shot, but the signals coming my way are good, and I said that at the beginning of my comments. The ray of hope can be seen on a distant horizon. Maybe we'll see it in the next batch of audits, and I'll be here to report to my colleagues what those audits show, and I hope I can give every one of them B's and A's. The 15 best reports show that the Department of Defense Office of the Inspector General Audit Office is capable of producing quality reports. That number is obviously just a drop in the bucket, but these fine reports could be a solid foundation for building on the future. Repeat them 10 times, and Mr. Blair could well be on his way to creating that world-class auditing operation, one that would be capable of detecting, and not only detect, but because so people are going to be so scared of them that it's going to deter fraud and waste. Mr. President, before those lofty goals can be achieved, Mr. Hedel and Mr. Blair need to tear down some walls, and I call them the top 10 audit roadblocks, and these roadblocks are these. 1, top management lacks a clear and common vision of and commitment to the Inspector General's core mission, a problem that adversely affects every aspect of auditing. 2, second roadblock, most audits are policy compliance reviews that yield zero financial benefit to the taxpayers. Roadblock 3, auditors are not on the money trail 24/7 where they need to be to detect fraud and waste. Roadblock 4, auditors consistently fail to verify potential fraud and waste by connecting all the dots in the cycle of transactions. They need to match contract requirements with deliveries and payments using primary source documents. By making these match-ups, auditors will be positioned to address key oversight questions like, did the government receive what it ordered at an agreed-upon price and schedule? Or did the government get ripped off, and if so, ripped off by how much money? Roadblock 5, most audits take so long to complete that they're stale and irrelevant by the time they're published. Reasonable time to complete goals need to be set, and the audit team then can be organized with the right skills to meet the skill sets to meet these goals. Roadblock 6, until the Department of Defense accounting system is fixed, complete audits will require large audit teams if reports are to be completed within a reasonable length of time. Roadblock 7, audit findings and recommendations are usually weak. Responsible officials are rarely held accountable, and wasted and stolen money is rarely recommended for recovery and returning to the Treasury. Roadblock 8, while relentless follow-up is an important part of audit effectiveness, it is not practiced by the audit office. And the last roadblock, 9, since the Department of Defense broken accounting system is obstructing the audit process, contracts designed to fix that system need to be assigned a much higher audit priority. These mighty barriers stand between all the promises and reality. IG Hedel and Deputy Blair must find a way to tear down these walls. Otherwise, audit reform and transaction will never happen. These unresolved issues will demand tenacious watchdogging by my oversight team and by other, I should say all other oversight bodies as well, including the Committees on Armed Services and Appropriations. Mr. President, my oversight staff will keep reading and evaluating the Office of Inspector General audits until steady improvement is popping up on my oversight radar screen every day. I yield the floor. I suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Kaka.
Mr. President.
The Republican leader.
I ask that further on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, as senators return to Washington this week, we do so amid a crush of troubling news about the economy. In the past week alone, we have learned that home values across the country are still falling at a time when about 1 out of 5 homeowners already owe more on their homes than the homes are worth. Auto sales are down. Manufacturers are showing the weakest growth in nearly 2 years. And there's deep pessimism about the prospects of a recovery anytime soon. So while some in Washington have sought to kind of paper over the economic problems or offer weak assurances that a recovery is right around the corner, millions of Americans continue to suffer with no end in sight. And very few people are confident that things will turn around anytime soon. Now, it's no secret why. For 2.5 years, Democrats in Washington have paid lip service to the idea of job creation while pursuing an agenda that is radically opposed to it. And the results speak for themselves. They told us that if we borrowed $1 trillion and spent it, unemployment wouldn't rise above 8%. 2.5 years later, unemployment is hovering above 9%, higher than when the stimulus was signed. They told us that if we spent trillions on a new health care entitlement, we'd see health care costs go down. A year later, health care costs are expected to go up. They told us that if we spent money we didn't have on things like cash for clunkers, turtle tunnels, solar panels, and windmills, in other words, on more government, the recovery would take care of itself. And where has it gotten us? Well, last week, a second rating agency threatened that if we don't get our fiscal house in order in a matter of weeks, America's stellar rating runs a serious risk of being downgraded. Now, this is uncharted territory. The warning signs are clear and urgent. Something must be done. Now, the first step is to recognize how we got here. That's the easy part. The government-driven policies of the last 2.5 years have clearly been a failure. The next step is getting Democrats in Washington to admit it. That's the hard part. If the last few weeks have shown us anything, it's that Democrats in Washington are in a deep, deep state of denial. We've seen their approach to all the warnings. As signs of an economic catastrophe have gathered, Republicans have offered concrete proposals for creating jobs and growing the economy. We've offered multiple concrete budget proposals. We've offered specific plans for reining in the crushing costs of entitlements and for preserving them. Democrats have offered a 30-second campaign ad of someone pushing a grandmother off a cliff. As ratings agencies have sent up smoke signals about the catastrophic consequences of a potential default, Republicans have proposed plans that would rein in our deficits and debt and send a clear signal to taxpayers and the world that lawmakers in Washington have the will to live within our means. Democrats rushed to the White House and demanded that the president raise taxes. The past weeks should have been a wake-up call for Democrats. They sent it through to voicemail. More concerned about an election that's nearly 2.5 years away, Democrats have ignored every single warning. Americans look at all this and they ask themselves a simple question: when will these guys get serious? Every light on the control panel is flashing red. Yet amid all the bad news this past Friday, the president heads out to Toledo to pat himself on the back for an auto bailout that expected to cost taxpayers tens of billions of dollars. Nearly 14 million Americans are looking for jobs and can't find them, yet the president, who acknowledges that free trade agreements will create hundreds of thousands of new jobs, is now suddenly holding them hostage in exchange for even more government spending. American businesses want to expand and hire, yet the White House is weighing them down with mountains of new regulations and costs, health care mandates, taxes, and conflicting signals about the future. American energy producers want to tap into our own resources, yet the administration is blocking them at every turn. One of our nation's biggest and proudest manufacturers wants to build a new factory that would employ thousands and solidify its reputation as an industry leader in the world, yet the administration is standing in the way in order to help their union allies. Since when do businesses have to ask the President's permission to create jobs? Most people know that when it comes to politicians, you should pay more attention to what they do than what they say. Never was this truer than when it comes to Democrats in Washington today. Just consider this. 3 years ago, my good friend, the Majority Leader, issued a press release blasting the Bush administration on its approach to unemployment and debt. He called those figures a casualty of the administration's failed economic policies and a shameful legacy of the policies of the previous 8 years. Now, at the time my friend, the Majority Leader, made that statement, unemployment, Mr. President, was 5%. The national debt stood at $9.2 trillion. Today, with unemployment above 9% and the debt at more than $14 trillion, Democrats are silent. They have no plan, no proposals, no sense of urgency. They run the White House and they run the Senate, and yet their entire approach is to sit back and wait. No budget, no plans, just wait for the next election. Let Republicans offer solutions and then we'll attack them and pretend you care about jobs. That's the game plan. Here's the problem. Unless you're a political consultant or just standing around waiting for a bailout, their plan won't do anything to create a single new job, not one. And it won't do anything to address the crisis we know is coming. There is no excuse for inaction. And that's why Republicans refuse to sit back and wait. Until these crises are met, until we see more jobs being created, until the American people begin to regain their confidence in this economy, then we'll have to be out there proposing solutions, coming up with answers, making our case. And we'll keep at it until our Democratic friends finally start to focus on the battle for America's future instead of the battle over next year's election. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.